Right. So, as part of today's Guidewire Developer training program in context to the Guidewire Developer role from the policy center point of view, today I'm going to discuss about activities because how do we create activities and all everything. So, when we want to going to create any kind of activities and all that, so how generally the code we need to write. So, before this is the code which normally we write when we want to create any kind of activity because creating business flows etc followed by the API creations everything is part of the application development. So before getting into an explanation about this code which was mentioned over here, let me explain you what exactly activities are being into Guidewire developer role, especially when we are working on. So we must be knowing about how and what exactly activities are all about. Majorly, activities are the one which majorly created from activity patterns because what are the different activity patterns we have? Because I'll give you an explanation about what exactly activity pattern. Activity pattern, nothing but the kind of set of default values for any kind of fields we are creating in the activity, something like descriptions or subjects or priority and all. So every activity pattern, we have a code because what are the code I was mentioning here, right? So have a code and all. So whenever there are any kind of contact insured or legal reviews to be made, everything. So for that purposes, generally activity patterns are something we create. So in whenever we have created an activity pattern, right? So there is a difference between activity pattern to design pattern. I'll give you an example in a generalized view. Let's say, for example, you want to construct a building. The example which I'm giving you is an example I'm giving for a layman perspective because most of the people who are in the guideware development have a doubt, right? So what is the difference between activity pattern to design pattern? Activity pattern means, let's say you want to construct a building. So whatever the building plan is required, right? External building plan you want a particular building to be constructed. So that is what we call as activity pattern. Design pattern means whatever the interior you are doing within the building. For example, you're constructing a flat, you're constructing a residential apartment or residential building or something. Whatever the interior you are doing, right? Either for a drawing room, either for the other rooms like either for kitchen, right? So whatever the interior you are going to do, this is where generally we call it as design patterns comes into picture. So this is how I want to differentiate between these two. I hope you know that. You understood that. Now coming back to the activity patterns itself is concerned. Whenever if you want to create any kind of activity, there are some activity patterns. From activity patterns, we create the activities because whenever we want to create an activity through the system APIs we are going to generate, there are only some kind of required fields for activity patterns required, which majorly specifies about the kind of code we are using because the activity patterns typically contains all the necessary default values. At the same time, what are the activity patterns as well as the kind of fields we are using, everything comes under the caller applications which need to be specified over there. In this context, it's always important for us to understand and create a contact insured activity pattern for any kind of account. This activity uh, defaults to all the values in the contact insured activity pattern when we are going to create. For that, whenever you are writing a code, being a Guidewire developer, it's always important for us to use some IDEs. We have some my Eclipse IDEs, NetBeans, right? So at the same time, IntelliJ IDE, right? So Visual Studio Code. So different IDEs will be used to write the code for the code for the activity pattern, whatever activity which I was mentioned you so far. So this is what generally the code we write because as in when I have mentioned you, when you are going to do that, we need to create some APIs. So generally there are different methods are there in API. Get post, etc. All that stuff, right? So post is an activity because we are posting an activity when to create this code, right? So that's the reason why we need to use post. And whatever the account you are going to create, at the same time, the kind of version of accounts we have. For example, version account, in that account, we have version 1, right? So V1 we have taken. And at the same time, whatever the accounts we are going to create, whatever the activities we require to perform, that we have to be mentioned in the first level. So basics of Java and how this code to be written and all, I have already explained in your previous classes, if you remember, that I already explained you. So that I am not explaining all this because I am explaining you the code which was mentioned for activity here. Next, we need to update the data, right? So whatever the data attributes we have, whatever the data attributes which are to be mentioned over here, everything has to be mentioned over here. Next, we need to update because as in when I already mentioned some time back, whenever you are going to create any kind of activities, this is something we are accessing from the activity patterns itself. So whenever we are accessing this from the activity patterns, it's always important for us to understand about what are the contact issued activity pattern we are going to create. Hence, activity pattern for contact issued is something which we need to be updated. So this is how generally in code which we need to write. So as being into Guidewire developer from the policy center point of view, whenever you are working on some configurations, right? So or integration purposes or something. Because some job roles you can see from the configuration point of view where we need to understand the required business rules and government mandates and make some necessary changes. When it comes to the integration part, we will be focusing more on the integration point of view. So this is what and how usually we need to write activity for any of the application, especially activity if you want to create, especially for activity patterns. This is what something which normally we write. This is what today about how to create a code for an activity. Tomorrow I'm going to discuss about one more thing. Okay, see you. Bye.